Welcome to Carl DeGregorio's Death Session 99. We're going to jump right back into it. And I'm, again, a victim of my own vanity and eyesight issues. Either wear contacts when you do this stuff so you can keep your eye on things, or wear the glasses, or just double check. I've spoken for 15 minutes without recording. So, and I was cooking with gas, but I was referencing, and I'm gonna try to duplicate it, because again, refined thought is what writing is often considered, and I've used this format as a while albeit on a screen, I've used it to sort of reset my brain for the week, off of the grid, off of the distraction, to do a verbal, which is anathema probably to any precept of meditation, but to do a verbal meditation, or a verbal harangue, or I guess to create almost a trance, a spoken trance state for me, where I filter ideas of the week, what I've come up upon, and I've decided to put it on camera. And so screwing up the recording and all that stuff, that can make it what's the word, the folly of the exercise very clear. But it's 99. It's Death Session 99. And I was talking about Nena's 99 Luftballons, red balloons. And I was talking about how quaint it would be for parents of the day that only have to contend with the distraction of MTV and the decline of Western civilization through the music video. How quaint a notion that might have been. How much we would trade that. And I was saying that essentially with that sort of monoculture, the curated, gate-kept, and advertising-driven mandates of the charts, the Billboard charts and things like that, that 99 Red Balloons was more of a novelty hit. Name another song by that band. And that it's more analogous with a viral meme. Because there were groups that had hits, but were really sort of somehow, I've heard, this is not my idea, but the notion that Prince was an alternative artist that somehow stayed with his heart as an artist, and the culture came to him because he was very experimental, very out there, very, very bending of barriers and bending of genres. And he could play, and he was really had something for everyone, but things like Dove's Cry without the bass line, and almost like harpsichord sounds, and a pretty heavy duty imagery that didn't really have any explanation, almost coining a phrase. This is what it sounds like when doves cry, That's pretty heavy stuff for a number one song versus 99 Luft Balloons. So things do break through, but it's probably happy accidents and sort of the uncontainability of the human spirit that was promised, I guess, by the internet in the beginning, that democracy would choose, but they we always come up against that. They have now found a way to manipulate with bots and social media and advertising, and dollars can really make that democratic playing field of the internet still gate kept in a way. Still, I know comics, during the sort of beginning stages were buying followers to make sure that they had respectable numbers, and believe it or not, ultimately that is the way to get the exponential growth to occur. And then hopefully you're very diligent, and then it becomes chicken egg, organic, inorganic, and then you have so many followers that the inevitability of bots being in your... But if you have under 1,000 and you have bots, you're doing something crazy, But we're at 99, and I guess this is where I have to depart from some of the gems I was spitting before. But I was talking also about the Odyssey, Christopher Nolan's movie. I haven't seen it yet. I did see the Oppenheimer in the theater, and it's pretty cool. But I can't say I'd ever want to see it again. There's a podcast I enjoy called The Rewatchables. I don't know that any of those Nolan movies are for me. I caught Inception on a plane. And along the lines of what made it on the charts in terms of Nena and 99 Red Balloons, I made the analogy that Pink Floyd got through. Didn't have a lot of top 40 hits, but if it's just these are all matters of taste, I'm kind of ambivalent toward them. But some people swear that that's a great band, and their productivity and their lifespan on the charts proves that they resonated. And what I was talking about previous was that they did something that the English classes in high school couldn't do. They reached out to the thirsty minds of like what you would call burnouts or druggies, weed heads, kids who maybe weren't really vibing. And it unfortunately it should have been that intellectual storytelling and musicality, and should have been in the curriculum where they were just as inspired by Julius Caesar or the great books and things like that. But what really happened with Pink Floyd is that all the burnouts who weren't avid students would say to you, bro, it tells a story, bro. I've put the headphones on. I just vibe out, man. You just press play, man. And, and I liked hits because I was academically inclined and I probably needed to burn energy or escape, or I was paying attention in school. So I don't know. I'm not putting a judgment on it. I'm saying that Christopher Nolan fans in movies, they're similar to like Pink Floyd in that people kind of find themselves flattered by the notion that they can keep up with those movies. And coming from someone who was inspired by Pacino, De Niro, Brando, Gary Oldman, things like that, I need an emotional core, maybe even the actors, studio actors, or the Elia Kazan movies. I've never really seen my fantasy vision of my acting career being in sci-fi or whatever. But of course, I don't have the choice of choice. I don't have the luxury of being selective in my roles. So, but they leave you cold, and I think sometimes that is the point. But you cannot knock the virtuoso filmmaking. It's just a matter of taste that he leaves it on the screen. As far as real, Dunkirk is an incredible film. That one kind of stirred me. They always have emotions, but not psychology. Do you know what I mean? And maybe that's a British thing. And anyway, I mean, I'm excited to see the Odyssey for the fact that I was a avid Greek mythology nerd as a kid. I think somewhere along the line on a Christmas, I got a book of Greek mythology, and I really vibed on it. And I don't know that we covered it a lot in school. So I think that was an avocation of mine. But I also, I still remember all the Greek and Roman, and maybe it's just trivia, but like Greek and Roman equivalents. So Venus and Aphrodite being the same god, just one Roman, one Greek. Ares and, is it Mercury or Apollo? One of those, those are the same. Zeus and Jupiter? No, who is the equivalent of Zeus in the Roman? Neptune is the sea, and Poseidon, Zeus, and it's a planet, I think. But and I guess I don't remember as well as I do, but I was definitely into the Greek gods. And so when I've listened to some podcasts where they're explaining the Odyssey and they jokingly say, it's a 3,000-year-old book. Can we talk about spoilers? But what I'm saying is like, the reason it's such an accomplishment is that it's sort of like the unfilmable film. And he is basically, other than the Bible, the Odyssey is and the Iliad are if you're an actor, if you're a writer, if you do anything in the storytelling realm, it starts, the greatest stories told are the Iliad, the Odyssey, Dante's Inferno, the Bible, and Shakespeare. And I'm sure we'll debate that, or people will debate that, but that is the lineage you are. And then the Greek plays. Those are hard, but I did enjoy those. The Antigone is a good one. Trojan Women. The fact that Euripides was the comic of the bunch, and knowing any of that stuff is the proof of a fine arts education that does not translate. But so I want to see it because I want to see. But I don't really care about the brouhaha about it. Like I said, I would say that Christopher Nolan is far down my list of, Scorsese being at the top. I'll tell you, this will not track with any of the previous poses of my youth or what have you, but John Carney is a director whose films I gravitate toward, which are essentially musicals. But there's something very heartfelt about them, and he did Once, and he did Begin Again, and Sing Street, and I think he's got a new one coming out. But he's a director that I don't know. I need emotion. I need heart. I need things to press in on. I guess the psychological part of things. And as an actor, that's probably my entry point. And Christopher Nolan is really just doing verisimilitude. He's doing historical accuracy. I know that in Dunkirk, the extent the bomb, like those leather helmets that the pilots wore, like he either had surplus originals or they made them from scratch. So like down to the patina on the brass and things like that. Which I'm all for, which is all cool, and which is cool to see on the screen. And I hope that he collaborates with the actors and he lets them have their process, so that a guy like me who wants to have the psychology part or the interpersonal thing happen, that there's room for him to put a camera in front of that type of actor. Where I find he's definitely more concerned with plot and reality of the moments and shots and what's in the frame and all the stuff that as the actor I don't particularly concern myself with, but maybe as a writer I'm more into it. But I guess that's a big departure from what I was talking about. But we are at 99, and that makes me feel a certain anticipation for next week, what that stands for. I think I'll be my birthday is going to be kind of right smack dab between these next 99 and 100, and that's kind of fitting. Oddly enough, Christopher Nolan and I share a birthday, so that makes us Leos, if that means anything to you. But there's something to it, right? If the Roman Greek gods, or they some of them are named after planets, Jupiter, Neptune, that the zodiac, it's got to have, or it is, I think again the zodiac's probably storytelling that has been coincided and interpretations. And so, and I do think why I liked, I hate to say it, but like I did better in geometry than more abstract math was that geometry tells a story, right? And if you have a good geometry teacher, and then there's definition, so it's the combination of angles, but also definitions, isosceles, acute, obtuse, it's the perfect math for a English head or English major type or a drama student, because it's literally telling the story of the very rudiments of our world, right? I guess. And that you use geometry in all the sports, right? The tennis and billiards would be, they basically say these guys are geometrical geniuses, right? That they know how to make shots, they know how to figure out the English, the spin, and that's advanced geometry in real time. Basketball, the triangle offense, soccer with its crossings and arcs and formations and things like that. Football is on a gridiron, so I guess even science, I would venture to say, it tells a story. And even if we are in a matrix, if we are in a simulation, then storytelling still is the superpower that we seek, that we order our world in. If storytelling were making, Zeus's lightning bolt, like Zeus's throwing arrows was how we described lightning, right, to the ancients. And then scientists are like, is that true? Or that? But you still have to give lightning a word. You have to give lightning a word, And anybody who knows, or if you spin out in a car, you're feeling centrifugal force, and or if you ever get that panic where you take a on-ramp too fast and your car doesn't handle, and you feel like, if I let go of this wheel, I'm smacking into the wall. That is the true feeling of, I think, centrifugal force pulling you out because your speed is out of control. You took a different line and the wheels aren't contacting the ground. That's all the science we had as little kids coming to the real world. And I don't know what, it's the chicken and the egg. Did we figure that out? Did we manipulate that? Did we have tolerances? And that's why you test drive cars and crash them and things like that to see where, because the Jeep CJ5, certain Mitsubishis, they were tilting because their center of gravity was too high, and they weren't heavy enough, and the wheelbase wasn't wide enough, and they were tipping over, right? That's science. That is geometry. That is physics. That is aerodynamics. And part of me, I don't know that I had the brain to do it, but that stuff fascinates me now, then always has. And again, if I had had a teacher who understood that you still tell stories with science, that ultimately you have a thesis, a theory, and you try to prove it. And the problem with people being human is sometimes it's unproven, and you have to put ethics into it. And so the idea that you only study science and not Shakespeare to understand the moral dilemma and understand and the Greeks have a lot of that, a lot of the moral dilemmas, a lot of the evidence of making a fatal mistake is in the Greek tragedies. Like, that does, I think, have to go hand in hand with the scientific method. If you do an experiment and you lie about the results because you want to be famous as the guy who discovered this, that, or the other, you didn't read, how bad things can go in the Odyssey, in Oedipus, for fuck's sake, And I think psychology is like a soft science, but Oedipus, in the hands of if Oppenheimer maybe leaned a little bit more into the Greek tragedies, and maybe he didn't, because people were educated in a well-rounded way in the past, he might have thought about it. It's Icarus, right? Flying too close to the sun because you have wings made of wax. I mean, these are all, and I don't know, and this is where, this is what fascinates me about storytelling. And if storytelling weren't so powerful, why is it always a race with a new technology? Why is it always a race to see if movies will pick it up? Will it, talkies was a technology. The moving picture was a technology. And now AI. If the story wasn't so goddamn important, then why is the first sort of casualty and or first group that has to contend with a new technology is the artist, right? Because those are I don't know. I'm just sort of, I don't know why this just came to my mind, but my audition pieces when I was a kid, they're very overused, and they probably even were at the time. But the famous speech in King Lear is from Edmund the Bastard, right? And it was overused because when you're 17 and you're auditioning, so is Brighton Beach Memoir, so is anything. When you're 17 and you're auditioning for a drama school, you don't want to do, you don't want to audition as a 60-year-old husband of 6 because you're 17, you know. And there are very few, now there's more, but like there are very few youth roles that are present in classical things. So you're going to gravitate to Edmund, the bastard son in King Lear. And thou nature art my goddess is the first line. To thy law my services are bound. Wherefore should I stand in the plague of custom? That's the first 3 lines I can remember. But that was my classical audition piece. And I used it for, I think, maybe 4 or 5 auditions. And I got into 3 of the 5, I think. And Carnegie Mellon being the one I wanted the most. But I would do it. I could do it on a dime. I did it on a videotape that we sent to Florida. So I got an honorable mention in the Miami thing, the Young Arts, that even today I still get emails about. But I was doing Edmund, and it was Now God's Stand Up for Bastards. And I guess talk about, and what people forget about the Greeks and the Shakespeare's and stuff is you used to call somebody a bastard. And today that would be every kid with a single mom or a single dad is a bastard. And it's an insult, and it was a high insult. But if you see Game of Thrones, right, Jon Snow is a famous bastard, meaning it means his dad stepped out on his fucking mom and had a baby, right? It's like an Usher song, but in ancient Greece, right? This is my confession, you know? But bastards, it's a bad term to call someone a bastard. It wouldn't even land as an insult almost today because it's such a quaint notion. But it really was resonant in bloodlines for nobility and for kings and for, you know, so to be lineage, right? I mean, we still talk about this nonsense with the royal family and that Harry's the spare because the chances of him getting the throne would have to be, you know, catastrophic loss in his family for him to, you know. And we don't have that in America. We have rules of succession based on elected officials, et cetera, et cetera. But for Edmund the Bastard, when you say now God stand up for bastards, it was a real sentence because you were half noble and half outcast, right? And I bring this up because I guess it just made me think of my dad, and I guess this is why I want to see the Odyssey. It just, my folks, my mom and my dad believed in education as the great leveler, the great equalizer. I came from a good family, but, you know, not a political family and not a wealthy family. But I did have 2 parents who went to college at a time when that was rare, and I was blessed to be not an option to decide about whether it was a possibility or not. It was an expectation. So right there, you lament about people being born on third base. If I'm you're born on base with that kind of notion in your life and your expectation. So I can't really cop to a hard scrapple upbringing, and I hope I don't catch myself doing that. It's only in the comparison to a wealthy family or a Rockefeller or something like that you find out, you know, there are. So I don't know how I related other than the youthful exuberance of now God stand up for bastards, right? But my dad loved hearing me do that speech. he'd he'd be like, "No, God, stand up for bastards," and it was like that. It's the ending line, and it's basically saying, "Thou nature art my goddess, to thy law thy services are bound," meaning I'm fucked here on earth because of this ignoble birth, but I appeal to a higher authority, that I will have my revenge, right? That's the great line in Gladiator. I will have my revenge in this life or the next. And now, God, stand up for bastards. It is fairly relatable, and you get to shout, and anybody who would do it with glee and relish and confidence and learn those lines, it was probably a thing to see. A 17-year-old kid, 6'2", just barking out this line. And I wish I wasn't as neurotic and nervous about things. I want to get back to that, where you channeling that youthful cockiness, where it's like, right circumstance, right. If it's up to me, things, and that was my dad's big issue, was, I guess he didn't get to see success that he was just so certain was going to arrive for me. And I'm certain I did too. And I've had, glimmers and wins and losses like we all have. And none of it negates my life. And I have to remember that. But just, I guess, getting my head around the Odyssey and that classic Greek, that was the training in drama school. And what I mean to say, I guess, about it when I spoke about like the burnouts in Pink Floyd, and I straddled that because some of that stuff was going over my head even by the time I got there, and some of it did not appeal to me. You know what I mean? And while I think I know the story of Odysseus, just intellectually writing that script based on that, Christopher Nolan is an academic, and I don't know who's credited with the screenplay, but that's some heavy lifting. That is some high PhD level academic heavy lifting to get a shooting script of the Odyssey. Never mind being able to have that many set pieces that you have to recreate and do them practically. So for that reason, I want to see it. And but what I remember about my auditions, one of them in particular, it was that my dad recounted either sneaking down the hallway when I went into the room, and that when I said, "Now, God, stand up for bastards," like he said he could hear it down the hall. It sounded good, And I guess through that lens, I don't think calculus is going to give you that connectivity to your dad, a good memory, a time travel, to still know the lines of Edmund the Bastard speech, to know that I don't know if they even go so far as to say don't do that monologue. I think it was even borderline overused at the time, but my theory and my cockiness and the fact that I was so well rehearsed and so into it that so I'll sing, it'd be like singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow for a musical. Like, people don't want to hear it, and how are you going to do something new with it? There's a famous story I heard that John Turturro either got into Yale's drama school, or after Yale drama school got into a Scorsese movie, and his monologue of choice was from On the Waterfront. So he dared to do Brando in a monologue form, and that audacity was what maybe got him the role. And so, but all I'm saying is, like, the storytelling is the vehicle of, I don't know, change. And I think what happens is, if people don't even understand the definitions of tragedy. It doesn't mean likable and sympathy. The tragedy, and that's what Oliver Stone was kind of getting at with Nixon. I would imagine Oliver Stone, I don't know where he's at now, but I think he was a little bit left of center at the time of making Nixon. But Nixon is a tragic character, right? His paranoia, his race, whatever the F was wrong with this dude, his insecurities, getting smoked by Kennedy and then ultimately getting another chance, losing. He lost a bunch of elections before he won. So he was a power obsessed, all this stuff. That's the definitional, the definitive version of a tragic figure, right? That, and it doesn't mean likability. And those are probably what's wrong with the stuff we watch today. Is it's either a bad guy or a good guy. The shades of gray are left out, and we're afraid to humanize unlikable figures. And it took a while. And then to have an actor like Anthony Hopkins play Nixon, he didn't do the thing that is so lauded nowadays as good acting. I don't think good acting is mimicry. It is channeling a character through the best you can do in an interpretation. I mean, we used to be sort of warned off mimicry, or, you know, but the ubiquity of reels and the ubiquity of acting industrial complexes of voice and speech, and people being really good mimics, and voice actors having Instagram pages, and people literally say he sounded exactly like him, man. But I find that takes you out. And so somebody like Anthony Hopkins, like, he didn't resemble Nixon, didn't sound like Nixon, but he had that inner core of brokenness, the inevitable. Like, that's the other thing about a tragedy. If you label it a tragedy, like in Shakespeare's time, you know, motherfucker's gonna die at the end, and it's gonna be his fucking fault, his fatal flaw, right? He's going down, and you know it, and the inevitability doesn't make it any less interesting and exciting to watch. It's almost as if, you know, the impending doom over the whole thing. And then if you do a good enough job, you make people forget, and you think there's a chance. And that, I think, is the acting, the music, the writing, the beautiful thing we do. And I hope that I get to do it some more. And I got to get to the present day. And thank you, Dad, for being an English major, and Mom for being a reader and making me the egghead who loved stories and wanted to act in them. And, you know, instead of, you know, I had a moment where I was just going off about you know, Nepo babies, you know. And my buddy's like, yeah, but none of those stories that you are accurately recounting, none of those things are stopping you. And I was like, you are damn right. And so I guess it's a gratitude that I get to tell stories, that I still get to be, you know, who I am, who I was, who I am. Edmund, God, stand up for bastards, you know. That fire in the belly, you know. And we're hopefully completing this short film that I've spoken about, I think, for 6 months. It's been on the back burner, even in the world of indie and in the world of doing things on spec, and they can take that long. And I'll be a little honest, I'm excited for sure, and much more so after this meeting in the flesh and being around people and talking about the project. That excited, but there's been a lot of back and forth, rehearsals, auditions, and I'm, you know, you get a little wary of how your time's being wasted, if this is worth it, understanding you need momentum and rewrites and things like that. But I think that's a lot of the troubling psychology I battle with, telling me these stories, where it's just, what else, not what else are you doing, but like, let's embrace it. You're still, you know, you're still playing in the toy department, you know, you're still holding out. It's, you know, Friday afternoon and you're doing an improv. That's pretty fucking excellent, to be in the game that long and to be in the middle of the day doing an improv, telling a story, being an actor. And I guess that's that final piece of whatever self-realization, self-improvement, or maybe too much self-regard or whatever. But I guess when that gratitude piece comes in, and then you're not mad that you're not a famous offspring, you know, because what can I do about it? And then let's do this. That is the if I'd have only known that I was probably doing this organically. Now, God, stand up for bastards. That is the rage that Edmund the Bastard in King Lear feels. I finally understand that. And that's the thing that being a lifelong student won't, that lesson, that wish to, I'm too old to play that part now, but if I ever directed that play, I would say that feeling a struggling actor has when a Nepo baby gets a part is what it must feel like. That's Edmund, the kernel of that. And it all came to pass in real time before you, that if you're a student and you go to a very intensive process in a conservatory, or if you're an architect, or these things that are heavy duty, like sometimes the lesson comes 30 years later. Which is why acting is so fickle and so rough, but I have to feel more confident now than I ever have. Just when your body and your looks fade is when you become the actor you were born to be, and then you understand on a life experience level why Edmund is so pissed off, because he's a bastard. But we're all, quote unquote, not nobly born. There's always a reason you don't get what you want, or so you think. And so Edmund's not a likable character. He's not unlikable because the title of bastard. It's because he's bitter. That bitterness is going to fuck him up, and that bitterness ultimately will lead him down a path. And then you start to see in Shakespeare that Edmund these are all rough drafts of what becomes Hamlet. These are all rough. Romeo and all the youthful people grow up to be people down the line in the plays. Who was King Lear as a young man? You don't know, because that's probably in another play. And that goes back to the archetype, the Odyssey. Like who, and with science telling a story, like would Oppenheimer have done it if he had really integrated the tragedies of the Greeks, the tragedies of Shakespeare, that he ultimately also is a tragic figure. And that human beings, anybody who's lived in the world post the atom bomb we're on a razor's edge. Every fucking hour of every fucking day, we are living in a world where an obliteration is a button press away, and that's daunting in a way, but it's also, I guess, what we have to live with. But that's the stakes. And talk about like this is why you have to write high-end material, or try to be involved in high-end material, or play things at the height. These are the stakes. There's the great scene in Adaptation, which is the last time I could handle Nicolas Cage. But in Adaptation, he goes to the I think it's James McKee, Scott McKee. McKee is the last name. He goes to this seminar, who's like a famous screenwriting guru who does these, like, how to write a great screenplay. And he raises his hand, and he's the nerdy brother, not the confident brother, playing twins in Adaptation. Charlie Kaufman, you should see it. He and Chris Cooper's in it. He's fucking great. Meryl Streep. But he raises his hand in the open question, and he goes, "I'm writing this thing, and what do you suggest about writing a story where nothing really happens, and it's kind of an intern?" And Brian Cox, who's more famous now in his later years, which is my hope and dream for my career, more famous than he ever was, but he plays this guru screenwriter, and the guy says nothing happens. And here's the rub about the Brits playing Americans: he's not doing a great job obliterating his accent, but that you don't care. And I hope, again, that'll apply to me. But he goes, nothing happens. People live, people die, people get run over by, he goes off on this diatribe that life itself is poignant, and you can't write shit, and stop wasting. And he goes, stop wasting our time with this navel-gazing bullshit. Which is, I guess, part of why my drive now maybe is to have to be the driver of the material too, because I don't like low stakes, wasting time, navel gazing bullshit. Self-referential as it may be, or based on a true story as it may be. So what? Like, what's going on? There's a great small picture on Prime right now called A Little Prayer. My brother recommended it, and it's David Strathairn, and he plays like a man who owns a sheet metal company, does well for himself. It's set in like a very small town, but he's a successful man, and it's really like a domestic, mannered little, like, I don't want to say Tennessee Williams, like Arthur Miller, almost, like kind of telling of multi-generations, which is another thing we lose a lot in the way we're telling stories these days. But it's multi-generational. He's got a daughter-in-law who is just the peach of a person, and spoilers. A Little Prayer on Prime, and David Strathairn just putting on a master class of subtle acting. And for me, the movie probably would turn off people who want to see the Odyssey, turn off people who like the DC universe, because not a lot happens. But a million things happen in the performances, and there's a fucking climactic scene that's a heartbreaker, because it talks about the stakes of life, and he knows his son is no good, which is, I don't know how you act that without having kids of your own, but that's a heavy thing to play. And I guess it's universal in terms of you could play it. And I don't know if David Strathairn's a family man or not, but he has this amazing affection for his daughter-in-law who's too good for his son. And he's a good man, and his wife's a good woman. They're maybe they just didn't have the skill set, but they have another daughter who's in a bad, their kids are a fucking mess. And he's a good man. And I think that's the ultimate sympathy that you have to extend parents, your parents, all parents. What a fucking impossible job it is. They had everything. I guess the war and their service records, that's a big part of the story. They're veterans, and they go to the VFW, and those ghosts haunt them, which is evident, but not even remotely discussed. Just the fact that they're at the VFW and they don't mention it, and that the drinking and so you can see that even families that have it all together, the people can go off course. And I think that the lesson and why it's a beautiful movie is that love is really still the only glue that will ever hold anything together, and that it doesn't always jibe with the people in your family necessarily. And that's the beauty of the scene, is this saintly woman, this sister, the daughter-in-law, who's nicer to these folks than that she has any need to be, becomes like his favorite. And she's not blood, but he loves her. And it's a great scene where she says, you and I are something that I finally understand. She said, we're kindred spirits. And it's like basic stuff, basic 101, but it's beautiful. And to me, you could have the Trojan horse be built to the specs of the Odyssey's description. You can say it's 40 stone or whatever the fuck the measurement was, and you can wheel it out there and get the verisimilitude and have it be so that's 50, I don't know how many guys come running out of the Trojan horse, but so you have to build it big enough for that. That might not move me as much as a scene on a park bench where she brought sandwiches, That's the stuff that moves me. That the act of bringing somebody a sandwich and then sitting on a bench, and he tells her, man, you gotta leave. To me, that's that's what I got into acting for, or into the theater. I where the truth is more vivid, delivered through the mechanism of a story. And that can change you, I believe. It can change you moving forward. It can remind you. And I do think part of this reflecting on the death session was the thing I missed most about the academic institution and being about things of the mind and of the spirit and of the body is that you do have to digest it and marinate in it, think about it, forget about it, and then come back to discuss it some other way, some other how. And it all, goes back to the gift of being an actor. My friend reaching out to be stirred by that moment in the college campus, reminding myself to then have the discovery. And I don't know, it doesn't put money in my bank account to figure out that the Nepo baby would have been a great way to get a young actor to understand the rage of Edmund the Bastard in King Lear. You know what I mean? And I do think that would be sort of my philosophy of acting, and how I would help actors moving forward is, and I know it's about being spontaneous, but the spontaneous is the reaction. I think the as if framing and saying go with a really good frame is what my entry point to acting would be. And I think it might even be termed as an as if, but that's sort of doing an as if that's not present in the story. And certainly Nepo babies didn't exist in the way we do, but they do if the king's son is an absolute moron. King Lear's daughter, the whole King Lear, going back to Brian Cox, King Lear is basically the template for succession. He's trying to figure out who's going to take it over, and I think he only has sons. He only has daughters, right? So he doesn't know he's dying, and he has no one to pass on. This is the whole tragedy of King Lear, if I'm not mistaken. And it just dawns on me, like, the further you get away from the classic structure, the further you get away, and the more you try to bend tragedy when there is no archetypical, agreed upon templates, to then morph. Nobody, that's the problem with, I guess, Hollywood or with screenwriting, or the imprecision of acting and the imprecision of writing stories. That's why music can't be fucked with, although it can, because people have put chords that aren't pretty together and made amazing music. So, but everybody knows a B flat is a B flat, and you can be out of tune, and then a B flat turns into an A sharp, right? Is that the way it goes? Or a C flat is a B, C sharp is a B flat, right? There's all of that shit. But it's true, you have to tune a guitar, and I believe things like that movie, A Little Prayer, that scene on the bench, those actors were in tune. The writing were true notes. And when you don't see it, it becomes like this, and then, who cares if it's AI? Because they're not playing at a level where it being in tune would blow your fucking mind. And those quiet stories, or Shakespeare, or all that stuff that goes into it, that is the goal I seek. That's the level I want to play at. That's the kind of actor I am, that I know I am, that, and that's why you do the great works, because they are the equivalent of Rachmaninoff. They are the equivalent of a Triple Lutz. They are the equivalent of trigonometry, or quantum physics, that for an actor doing the great roles. And hopefully we are still writing the great roles. I don't want to sound like an old head, but that is why we had one great exercise. I think I've referred to it, and I struggled in the first 2 years at CMU. I had issues that led to probation and things like that, and they were all personal, and I wasn't sharing any of this with people, or at least with the faculty. So they just saw someone who seemed to be dissociated, but I was really struggling. And I guess the only thing I could really turn on was my anger. And so if that wasn't always appropriate to the scene, so it was some of the more vulnerable, open, intimate things that, I wasn't able to let loose. And I was a natural comic, so I didn't even let them know I was funny till later in my tenure there. But there was one cool exercise where, and I don't know where it would apply. I guess in England, we don't even do it here anymore. But we were in the Greek tragedies. We were in the big we were doing acting in tragedies. And I had found Dr. Faustus, which is the Faustian bargain, which is what Damn Yankees is based on. There's an original text called Dr. Faustus, and it is the first time you encounter making a deal with the devil, and it's literally about that. And I don't know if I'm playing Dr. Faustus or if I'm playing the devil, but the exercise was, once the weather broke and was good in Pittsburgh, the teacher said, let's go out to the Shenley Park behind the campus. And it's this long, sprawling grass field, and it's on a bit of an incline or a decline. And the class would sit on the grass high up, and you would go down to the bottom. And the whole point was to perform like you were at the amphitheater, at the Acropolis, or those famous amphitheaters, and without amplification. Now, even with Broadway, they have the microphone here, they have the microphone here. But we were trained to be ready to do it without mics, right? And to still be able to communicate and because that's why you have to have the heavy duty stuff. No, God, Stand Up for Bastards would have been a good monologue for that. But I'd already done it, so I had to go and make it hard on myself and find another one instead of acing it by doing a monologue I knew and not telling it. I did that all over the place at drama school. I always bit off more than I could chew because I wanted to show the hard, It was like in math class where they say, show your work. I wanted to show the work, but it really should have been about amassing accomplishments. Or maybe it shouldn't have, but anyway, I did Dr. Faustus. And I think the monologue might have been about like, oh, fuck, I did make a deal with the devil. This was a big mistake. And that's a pretty heavy, tragic, and I don't know. I'd have to remember. I'd have to go back and remember it. And of course, I was the only one who had anything from Dr. Faustus because I was going to show off and show I was deep, and everybody was doing the, whatever the DeGregorio tragedies were. They went 101. They basically were the equivalent of a Chat GPT type of mentality. No one came in with Dr. Faustus. I knew that it would technically qualify as a tragedy, that it was outside of the usual canon, and I was trying to get points for being hyper literate and, knowing shit. But at very least, that didn't get in my way this time. And that big performing, that large, wounds, that whole thing, I really connected with it. And that was one of the rare times in the first 2 years that, even the teacher knew that this was sort of I did well with that unit, But that's because the heightenedness of the material, the making a deal with the devil. There's people who will never not shy, but like that is a universal classic structure template. And I think if you're not playing, and I don't know what that, and yet I say that in that small film, but that I think where Arthur Miller really put himself on the map is that they've always debated, is Death of a Salesman a tragedy? And I think the answer is yes, but it's an American tragedy versus a Greek tragedy versus a Shakespearean tragedy, an American tragedy. And I think this is a drama without the tragic element because someone doesn't die. But there is an Arthur Miller kind of American tragedy. And I think we even in the describing and in the progress of culture, they have kind of come up with hybrids of dramedies or, tragic comedy and things like that. They do these hyphenates. And I think that would be what that does. Now, like I said, you might not be vibing on this, but I like Train Dreams. I like these movies that everybody would think nothing happens. But if it's done at this granular level of life itself being profound, needing no more gravy, right? If that's what Italian food promises is 3 ingredients, delicious, right? And then fusion has to have all this other bullshit. I'm a meat and potatoes guy as far as my drama. And so it is literally it's a margarita pizza. It's about a family and nothing bad kind of happens or does. There's some stakes, but not. It's life itself doesn't need, a gilding of the lily. And I think technology promises to expand our horizon, and yet it's made us so much more narrow focused. And I want to fight back. I don't mean this as a political statement, but I am not going to shy away from the things I have learned. And I'm not going to shy away from, even if it's piggybacking or using, I'll give credit where credit is due and always name the source. But we meaning the people who care, or the highly literate, or the artist slash ethicists, or I don't know what it is, but the type of people who care, because that was the way I framed all my headshot stuff, was excuse me for giving a shit. And I'll end on this little anecdote, and I don't know where this fits in the storyline, but we went to a Mexican place that we go to all the time last night. And as I walked in, there's a line forming and there's people waiting, and you got to wait for door dashers. There's just this zoo-like vibe at the thing. And then I look up and there's no cashier, and it says the cash register is closed. Please use the self-ordering kiosk. And I bugged out. I was like, man, this is, and my girl was tired and I was tired, and I maybe made it fit. I thought I was being heard. I wasn't being heard, and she was right and I was right. I shouldn't have let it ruin my night. And ultimately it didn't, but it was about to. And we both kind of voiced like, don't let this ruin our night. And I was saying, but they're ruining everything. And maybe it's an old head, but like the whole idea is like, I am tired, I'm hungry, this is a go-to place, I just want to go up, order, sit in the car and wait for when it's ready. And I probably should have just called it in so I could talk to a human. But when I go there and I have to and it's Mexican food, which isn't complicated, but it's always got more buttons to press because it's choice of beans, choice of tortilla, and there's a line of tourists, maybe held over from the World Cup, or Santa Monica gets touristy in the summer, and there's no one to ask, and my beef is not that I'm a technophobe or a Luddite. It's the same computer that the cashier would have, except the cashier's got a year and a half of repetition and knows boom, boom, boom. When she listens, she could practically hit the shit. And also with touchscreen, the difference between touchscreen and knobs, which is why touchscreens are dangerous in cars and knobs aren't. You can fiddle with a knob and still keep your eye on the road because it's a tactile. It's the sonar, radar, bat skills we have we're losing, that you can fiddle with. That's why the buttons on the steering wheel, and you can change channels, and you can even channel surf, and you still got your eye on the road because they're just buttons and knobs. But with a touch screen, you have to make eye contact and finger contact. Okay. So what I'm saying is that these tourists, maybe struggling with the language, have to, and there's 5 of them, they got to order their own shit. And I'm flipping out like, I didn't come here to work. I'm not good at that computer. I'm not afraid of computers. I'm using one right now. So it can't be that. And it's not okay, boomer, because I ain't a boomer. And I probably interface with technology way more than I should. I just wanted to unload verbally, get my food, and be out of there. And now I have to fucking do it. And why? Why? Because there's people there. And what happens is when you rely on the computer, and they're perturbed because their new marching orders are to stay focused on efficiency and try not to interact with the people because it'll slow you down. And it's like, so then when you're asking for extra napkins that you couldn't type in because you forgot, which is not your fucking job, they don't even want to help you. And you're like, oh, here's your extra napkin. And we're killing ourselves. We're taking ourselves farther away from each other in real time, in real space, to what? To save the hourly for the person who'd have to sit at the goddamn counter and take people's orders. Now, it may have been, I don't even know if it was faster or slower, because like if you're a tourist and you're looking up at the board and you don't know what you want, you're fucking my life up. But I'm mad at you, the doofus in front of me, who didn't think about their decision to order tacos and wasting time in the decision making. And then you have sympathy for the person punching it in. But with this, they got to decide, they got to find it, they got to scroll. It's a fucking disaster, and it only helps the establishment and not the enjoyment. And I guess that is a techno rant, but we can't take the human out of the stories, because how are you going to move anybody off their fucking thing? And I don't want to get conspiratorial, but like the idea that we are losing empathy is because we are grinding everybody to a nub. And then I don't even see those people as human. I see them as impediments to me getting my tacos. And then I have to fucking deal with a computer. Like, it's going to make you hate people. And then if you have an agenda with what you do with the technology, this is just tacos we're talking about. And you can imagine being on the receiving end of this when you fed up. It's the end of the week. Maybe my girlfriend was right. We both kind of had a detente. We both got back to normal. And we went and got pizza, where you can still say to the dude, can I just get a fucking pie? You know, not order for yourself. And sometimes that is exactly what you need. Like when you go to a supermarket and all you need is saline solution for your contact lenses, you go in there, you go self-check because it's a scan and you're out. But when you got 50 fucking, you got weeks worth of shopping, I don't want to do that, you know? Or if you're ordering dinner for 8 people, how the fuck can't us? And you know, why don't they have someone who when you see a line, you have to eliminate the line by having more than one option. You can go talk to a person or use the computer if you're proficient. And at minimum, if it's your first time there, you're going to suck on that interface because they're all fucking different and the menus are all different. And this is acceptable to us, and we're ruining our life experience, you know? And then they want to remind you to get off your screens and to get into your, you know, get back to nature and make sure you have contact with loved ones and intimate dinners and stuff. But then they put that in your fucking face. And this was going to be our taco night, and now we're out of here because, you know. And we were joking by the time we got our pizza and driving home. I'm like, I bet you that family of 6 is still on that goddamn kiosk, you know? Maybe not, but it's a little glimmer. And then what I think about is like, maybe I couldn't shut it off, you know? And I don't like to self-diagnose, but this is a version of what the inability to not clamp. I was clamped on. I couldn't shut that notion off. The permutations of why this was wrong was really fucking me up. I'm not diagnosing myself, and I'm not asking for the diagnosis, but I've heard that anxiety, outward anxiety, is ultimately a mild form of an OCD, where you cannot let that injustice of what they're taking. Like, I just couldn't get off it. I made some progress because we had a bit of a moment, and then I was like, you're right. But I was like, I didn't ruin our night, this fucking thing. So, that's a long wander. I hope the restart captured some of the brilliance of the 4 or 5 minutes I spoke without it being recorded. Yeah, we're still recording, thank God. But now it's time for the song. I'm moving down the list. I wrote it down this time so I wouldn't have to scramble on camera for you. We did Pete Townshend's Give Blood. On the last week, and we'll have that, I think, present, if that was the one. I'll remember somewhere along the line. But Eugene Wilde, Gotta Get You Home With Me Tonight, is the song next on the all-time list. This is the original. I'm not even sure where Eugene Wilde is from. I think he's British, but he's African descended black guy from England, maybe, but it might be an American. And it's like a 80s R&B track, and it was sampled famously by Foxy Brown and by a million other people. But it's, ooh, baby, gotta get you home with me tonight. You know what I'm saying? And it's classic 80s R&B, which is another thing we need to get back to, is how good it was. The 80s, 90s R&B, early 2000s, you know, kind of up through the Usher 702s and things like that. Check it out, Eugene Wilde, little classic R&B, kind of slow jams, that sort of make out music. You know, the whole canon of a great R&B is different ways to say I need to get you home with me tonight. And now, you know, and this was an early indication of the descending or degeneration of language and of the mores of the day. Gotta Get You Home With Me Tonight, probably at the time was everybody's like, well, what happened to In the Still of the Night we used to have romance in our songs. Blue Moon, you saw me standing alone, and now the name of the song is Gotta Get You Home with Me Tonight. You know, famously, Let's Spend the Night Together, the Rolling Stones hit, had to be changed on the Ed Sullivan Show to Let's Spend Some Time Together, because that Let's Spend the Night Together was considered too sexually forward. And then Gotta Get You Home with Me Tonight is 20 years after that, and now I'm thinking that's a pretty cool turn of phrase, because what's out there now, and that is the progress. But the things like the Renaissance and things like there are cultural revolutions that beauty and art and expression do take a turn for the better, right? And I guess that's what the boomers can't shut the fuck up about, the great 60s and Dylan and all that stuff. But a renaissance is a rebirth, and I want to be part of that. And I guess that's what I'm saying about the artists. And now stand up for bastards, stand up for artists, need to stand up and be counted and try to infuse more beautiful stories into the culture, and quote unquote not sit idly by and let this stuff wash over us. And I got to do my best and do my part. So, Gotta Get You Home with Me Tonight. That's session 99. Wow. Next week, we're going to celebrate. Somehow, I got to find a way to celebrate 100 of these. And I thank you, and I will talk to you next week. Peace.